South Korea and U.S. officials have launched a working group on business visas following the mass detention of more than 300 Koreans connected to a Hyundai LG battery plant in Georgia last month. A White House official says U.S. President Donald Trump remains open to talking with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un without any preconditions. Trump also presided over a rare gathering of senior military leaders and called for greater military readiness to counter what he described as an invasion from within. South Korea held an annual ceremony today marking the 77th anniversary of the founding of the country's armed forces. The event featured advanced weapon systems incorporating AI, a taekwondo demonstration, and an aerobatic performance by the Black Eagles. Hello and thanks for joining us on Arirang News. Seoul and Washington launched a bilateral working group on business visas and visits, taking the first step to ensure Korean workers involved in major U.S. investment projects to enter without disruption. Our foreign affairs correspondent Oh Soo-young starts us off.
Seoul and Washington have agreed to clarify the rules for U.S. business visas in a move to ensure the smooth entry of Korean professionals driving multi-billion-dollar investment projects in the United States. The two governments launched their first bilateral visa working group in Washington, D.C. on Tuesday local time, responding to the visa bottlenecks that led to the week-long detention of more than 300 Koreans connected to a Hyundai LG battery plant in Georgia last month. Of those arrested, 170 were on short-term ESTA travel visas and 146 were on B1 or B2 visas. While they were released after a week, their detainment was highly questionable as US State Department rules allow B1 holders to train local staff and install equipment. At the working group's first meeting, the two sides confirmed that B1 visa holders are permitted to install, service and repair imported equipment. The US also reaffirmed that ESTA travelers are allowed to perform the same activities as B1 holders. To remove ambiguity, both governments will soon release a joint fact sheet outlining the scope of permissible tasks. The two sides further agreed to install a Korean investor desk inside the US Embassy in Seoul to serve as an access point for Korean companies investing in the US and help resolve visa issues quickly. Direct contact points will also be established between Korean consulates and US immigration agencies for close coordination. Beyond these measures, South Korea raised the need for institutional improvements. Australia and Singapore, for instance, have dedicated visa tracks for the entry of skilled workers to America. Washington cited immediate legislative hurdles, but pledged to continue reviewing possible long-term improvements. US President Donald Trump, along with local officials and experts, have stressed the need to keep Korean workers on site, given their role in setting up massive high-tech factories in America. However, with US regulations murky and many skilled workers hesitant to return to the US after the mass detention in Georgia, Korean firms have raised the need for clear and reliable measures to keep America a trusted investment destination. Seoul officials say fundamental solutions are needed if Korean firms are to deliver their multi-billion-dollar commitments to the US economy. The new working group agreed to meet again at the earliest possible date to continue their consultations. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, the White House says U.S. President Donald Trump remains open to dialogue with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un without preconditions. The U.S. leader also sharpened his rhetoric at home, calling for a stronger domestic role for the armed forces and warning of an invasion from within. Our Lee Seung-jae reports.
U.S. President Donald Trump is signaling that he remains open to dialogue with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, and this time without preconditions. A White House official told reporters Tuesday that Trump could be willing to meet Kim during his upcoming trip to South Korea for the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit. The official's remarks came in response to questions about whether the U.S. leader is prepared to resume talks with Pyongyang, even without directly addressing the nuclear issue. This marks the first time the Trump administration has publicly confirmed that there are no preconditions for renewed dialogue. The official also noted that President Trump held 3 unprecedented summits with Kim during his first term that helped stabilize tensions on the Korean peninsula. Kim Jong-un himself said earlier this month he would consider resuming talks if Washington dropped its denuclearization demands. But while extending an olive branch abroad, Trump also sharpened his rhetoric at home. On Tuesday, he summoned hundreds of top military leaders and advisors to the Marine Corps base in Virginia. Speaking alongside Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, Trump laid out what he described as a tougher, more uncompromising vision for America's armed forces. He proposed using U.S. cities as training grounds for troops and called for a greater military readiness to counter what he described as an invasion from within.
We're under invasion from within. No different than a foreign enemy, but more difficult in many ways because they don't wear uniforms. At least when they're wearing a uniform, you can take them out.
At the same event, Hegseth declared an end to what he called woke culture in the military and unveiled new directives, including fitness standards set at male-level benchmarks for all service members, regardless of gender. The meeting underscored Trump's intent to remake military culture and assert a stronger domestic role for the armed forces. He warned that commanders unwilling to follow his approach should do the honorable thing and resign. The dual messaging highlights Trump's current political strategy, extending a hand to North Korea while projecting a more forceful image at home. 이승재, Arirang News.
Today marks Armed Forces Day here in South Korea, and at a ceremony to celebrate the occasion, President Lee Jae-myung underscored the importance of building self-reliant defense capabilities.
급변하는 안보 환경에 능동적으로 대응하려면 자주 국방은 필연입니다. 대한민국의 평화와 번영을 위해서는 누구에게도 의존할 것이 아니라 우리 스스로의 힘을 더욱 키워야 합니다.
To that end, President Lee pledged to restructure the armed forces with cutting-edge technologies, vowing more investment in artificial intelligence, drones, and robots. He also reaffirmed plans to regain wartime operational control so that Seoul can lead the combined defense posture with the United States. The ceremony marking the 77th anniversary of the founding of the country's armed forces was held at the Gyeongdae Grand Parade Ground in Chungcheongnam-do Province, attended by thousands of service members, veterans, and spectators. Meanwhile, Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba has made his first and last visit to South Korea before stepping down. He met with President Lee Jae-myung in Busan, and hoping to bring their ties closer, the two leaders announced a joint consultative body to tackle social issues such as aging populations. Our top office correspondent Yoon Jung-min reports.
After around a month since their last talks in Tokyo, the leaders of the two neighbors sat down again, this time in South Korea's southeastern city of Busan. The summit began with a welcome ceremony by the Traditional Guard of Honor, presenting a procession of the centuries-old Joseon Tongsinsa diplomatic mission, a symbol of the long-standing exchanges between the two neighbors. It was more of a farewell meeting for Ishiba, but a message to continue cooperation was clear.
한국과 일본이 물리적으로 가까운 이 거리만큼 정서적으로도 경제적으로도 또 사회 문화적으로도 안보상으로나 정말로 가까워지길 바랍니다.
The sentiment was echoed by the Japanese leader.
I sincerely think that it's meaningful to conclude my last summit diplomacy with President Lee. I hope we can interact more often to yield more outcomes from our shuttle diplomacy.
President Lee Jae-myung and Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba announced a joint message to operate a joint consultative body on tackling population decline and revitalizing regions outside their respective capitals. Their focus was also on resuming their joint cooperative committee on science and technology, ways to cooperate for denuclearization of the peninsula, as well as partnership at a time of the fast-changing global trade order. The meeting was followed by a dinner, during which snowcraft from Ishiba's hometown of Totori Prefecture, as well as Korean galbijjim from E's hometown of Andong, and other dishes representing harmony. Ishiba is on a 2-day visit to South Korea, which is his first and will be the last visit before he steps down as prime minister in October. It's the first time in 21 years that a Japanese leader is visiting a city other than Seoul for a bilateral summit. Earlier in the day, Prime Minister Ishiba paid a visit to the grave of the late Lee Hyun in Busan, a Korean student who sacrificed his life in 2001 to rescue a Japanese man who had fallen onto the tracks at a railway station in Tokyo. No other sitting Japanese prime minister has done so. Meantime, First Lady Kim Hae-kyung has been diagnosed with an ear disease causing dizziness and was unable to attend the meeting. What's key from here is how to carry on bilateral cooperation with a looming leadership change in Japan at a time of rising global uncertainty in politics and trade. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News, Busan.
On the economic front, South Korea's exports surged to a record $65.95 billion in September, up 12.7% from the same month last year. The Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy said on Wednesday that the figure breaks a record set 3.5 years ago and marks the fourth consecutive month of export growth. Semiconductor exports reached a new peak of $16.61 billion, up 22%, fueled by strong global demand for high-value memory chips for AI servers. Automobile exports also set a September record at $6.4 billion, rising 16.8% on strong sales of eco-friendly vehicles. As for destinations, tariff policies in the U.S. pushed exports down by 1.4%, but all other destinations saw increases. One of Korea's most celebrated contemporary artists is taking center stage in Seoul. A retrospective on Lee Bul showcases works that blur the lines between history, technology, and human imagination. Our Pyongyang reports.
Step inside, and it feels like entering another universe. A giant silver airship floats above, while a vast mirrored installation pulls visitors into a space of infinite reflections. It's disorienting, playful, and mesmerizing all at once. This is the world of Lee Bul, one of the most influential figures in Korean contemporary art. Visitors were taken in by the complexity of her work.
It's pretty amazing how complex some of the structures are, and when you walk through, there's a place where there's all mirrors and you get very disorientated. So it's kind of dystopian, the way that some of the pieces melt down, and it's kind of like this weird city that's almost like set in the future kind of vibes.
Glistening surfaces, fractured structures, bunkers and towers all converge into an experience that feels suspended between worlds. Through these works, Lee Bul examines shifting ties between humanity and technology, and nature and civilization, reflecting on the past and present while imagining possible futures. Lee Bul first burst onto the scene in the 1980s with radical performances, suspending her own body from ropes or parading through city streets in elaborate costumes. This brought her international recognition in the following decade, along with the nickname 여전사, or warrior woman, of Korean contemporary art. But today, she has gone far beyond that nickname.
What makes her remarkable is that she transcended labels like Korean, Asian, or female artist, and has presented a wide-ranging body of work that reflects deeply on human history and culture.
Now in her 60s, Lee Bul is recognized as one of the biggest names in Korean modern art, with exhibitions at MoMA, the Venice Biennale, and New York's Metropolitan Museum of Art.
From warrior to world-renowned visionary, Lee Bul has redefined the boundaries of modern art here in Korea. Her retrospective from 1998 to now runs here in Seoul until January before traveling overseas. Pyongyang, Arirang News.
This is the world now. Starting off in the U.S., the White House Budget Office has announced that the U.S. government will shut down at midnight with a memorandum ordering agencies to begin executing their closure plans. The memo signed by Russell Vought, director of the Office of Management and Budget, came after senators were unable to pass a funding bill to keep the government running. It blamed Democrats for what it called an untenable posture and said it is unclear how long the shutdown will last. Federal employees are directed to report to work for their next scheduled shift, but only to complete shutdown procedures before being furloughed. Essential staff in defense, law enforcement, and emergency services will remain on duty without pay. The move marks the start of the 15th shutdown in U.S. history and comes after days of deadlock between President Trump and congressional Democrats. Economists warn the shutdown will delay key economic data and could rattle global markets. Turning to the Middle East, President Trump has issued an ultimatum to Hamas to accept a U.S.-backed plan to end the Gaza war, describing it as the group's best chance to avoid further bloodshed. The 20-point framework already endorsed by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu includes a ceasefire, the disarmament of Hamas, and the opening of humanitarian corridors. The U.S. says it has backing from regional partners as well. Trump told reporters that Hamas has 3 or 4 days to respond or face consequences. Hamas officials on Tuesday said the proposal is being discussed by the militant group. Analysts say it's a high-stakes gamble. If Hamas accepts, it could pave the way for peace talks and international reconstruction aid. If it rejects, Israel could escalate operations and violence may spread further into the region. The ultimatum comes as Gaza faces worsening humanitarian conditions, with aid agencies warning of shortages of food, water, and medical supplies. In the Philippines, a powerful earthquake rocked the Central Islands on Tuesday morning, leaving at least 5 people dead. The tremor struck near Cebu, one of the country's largest urban centers. The U.S. Geological Survey measured the quake at a magnitude 6.9. Thousands fled into the streets in Cebu City and neighboring provinces fearing aftershocks. Authorities confirmed at least 5 deaths and dozens of injuries. Damage was reported to homes, businesses, and infrastructure, though no tsunami warning was issued. Emergency crews are now inspecting bridges, hospitals, and other critical facilities. Officials say residents should remain alert as strong aftershocks remain possible. Researchers in Hungary have found that dogs can classify objects based on their purpose. In a study by Eötvös Loránd University in Budapest, dogs were asked to fetch toys labeled as fetch or pull. When new toys were introduced that looked different but had the same function, the dogs still correctly selected the toy based on its function. The findings published in Current Biology suggest dogs can extend learned labels to functionally similar objects, an ability usually linked to young children. Scientists say the results highlight how much more there is to discover about canine intelligence. Chu Ji-hyun, Arirang News.
October has begun and the autumn leaves are slowly starting to change color. The first autumn foliage and its peak are both expected to arrive later than average this year. Then white temperature swings will continue across much of Korea today, so please dress in layers to avoid catching a cold. Afternoon highs will go up slightly higher than yesterday, getting up to 26 degrees here in the capital. Daegu, Busan will be warmer at 28 degrees. And we can finally expect sunny skies nationwide today. Then rain is in the forecast from tomorrow night for Jeollanam-do and Jeju. National Foundation Day, which is the start of the long Chuseok holiday on Friday, looks like it's going to be a rainy one, and it will rain across Korea through the day of Chuseok. The first round of rain is expected to pound down the southern coast of Jeollanam-do province in Jeju with more than 80 millimeters in the forecast. So take the weather into account if you plan to hit the road early to visit your hometown.
That's all we have for today's noon edition of Arirang News. Thank you for watching. Arirang News will be back at 5 p.m. Korea time. Stay tuned.